Namaste, everyone. Welcome back to Ripples in the Sand, a podcast brought to you by the folks at Drifting Sands Haibun. Here we invite Haibun poets who have appeared in the journal to both read and discuss their poetry. I am your host, Sangita. I am a novice in the haikai path and I'm still learning the art of Haibun. Haibun, as you may know, is a form in which poetry is interleaved with haiku. In this series of readings, I hope that along with hearing excellent Haibun, we also learn a bit more about the form and creation of the piece. Now, today's guest is a computer programmer, database and web developer for more than 20 years. He's been writing prose and poetry sporadically since he was 20 and has had an on and off relationship with music, art, and photography. He started writing poetry in earnest in 2016 as a means of coping. He's hitchhiked across the country numerous times. Now he lives a quiet life as an artist, musician, photographer, and poet. Folks, today's guest is none other than the editor and founder of Drifting Sands, Richard Grahn. Richard is now more interested in giving than receiving, and is highly concerned about the future of the planet. Fun fact, he knows how to say thank you in at least 7 different languages. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you, Sangita. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Friends, today we have Richard reading some of his lovely Haibun and Tanka prose from his latest book, Longevity, Poems in the Key of Helen. I love the title, Richard. It's so different and it's fitting to your love of music. Would you like to explain about the title, Poems in the Key of Helen? It sounds heaven.
Well, Helen is my grandmother, and he had a very particular key. A very unusual person in the sense that he had a very warm, giving spirit, and a very forgiving person, very open-minded person. And if you knew her, she was the kind of person that if you knew her, you never forgot her. And she was an impossible person to forget. It was a little bit like music to know her. And the longevity part is the fact that not only did she live a very long and fruitful life, but that her influence has lasted so long, not only in my life, long past her life, but also in the lives of so many other people. She just lives on, and now, hopefully, in this book, she lives on as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I was reading the book, and sure enough, I can almost see her through your poems. It's just beautiful. Before we start, can we just go over, read your acknowledgement for her, the first thing, because that, I think, is so beautiful. It's such a beautiful poem.
Certainly. For Helen, to the woman I call Grandma, resting in peace in my mind, mentor, tutor, teacher, lover of poetry and literature, God and humanity. Thank you for standing by me all this time, for continually igniting my imagination in ways that shine your soft light on this harsh world. I am but a vessel. Thank you for filling me to the brim. For Helen.
Thank you. That is such a beautiful acknowledgement. Okay, would you like to introduce and read a Tanka poem for us? Maybe the next moment. It's on page 11.
Certainly.
That's
This is the opening poem to the book, titled "The Next Moment." One of my earlier poems. This book has a lot of my earlier work in it, and this is one that goes quite a ways back. It started out as a haibun actually, and got reworked into a Tanka prose. Anyways, it's titled "The Next Moment." She watched the leaf drop beneath the horizon and gently light on the ground. She watched as it became a memory, lingering there in the blooming sunrise. From her lips, so many lands to explore, the poetry of oft-handled books.
Thank you. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So tell me, did your grandma ever read any of your work or any of your poems?
Yes, I was very fortunate. When I say she was my mentor, she would sit with me, and she wanted to read every single thing I ever wrote. And that included all the letters I ever wrote her. But anytime I wrote something, anytime I ever wrote anything, she wanted to read it, and she was a teacher. She wanted to offer her suggestions, and whether it was grammar or content, and it didn't matter what the subject was. There was no subject taboo to her. She was just a very open person and a very encouraging person. I was going to mention that poem reflects back on what she did from a very early age. We would go over to her house when I was very young, and she had a bookshelf, a little low bookshelf, and it was all filled with children's books. Storybooks, Hansel and Gretel and Little Red Riding Hood and all this, and poems, poetry books, everything, Rudyard Kipling, and we would come into the room and come into the house, and it was like, Grandma, read us this, and she would always like, well, right after dinner, and we would always sit, and she would read us, and it was her thing. It's like she would read to us, and we didn't watch television. She read to us, and it never really dawned on me how much of a gift that was when it was happening. But I look back at it now, and it was such a gift, and it paid great dividends down the road. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but
yes. I was also wondering. So, would you say that that's where your love for poetry actually started with your grandma?
I believe so. Yes, I think it had its seeds there. It took a long time to take root, and I never had any formal education in poetry other than what I got from my grandmother, and I didn't really get into poetry until around 2016, and I can go into why I got into poetry at that point in my life. I had written some poetry in college. I mean, I dabbled in it on and off for my whole life, but I never was really in depth. But there was and this kind of dovetails into the whole reason I wrote the book, and what led me to writing the book was around 2000.
Can I interrupt a minute?
Sure.
Before we go into that, I really would love you to read one more. This is a haibun from your book, because I think it relates to childhood, and somehow I feel it relates to the beginning years. So, aviary, page 21.
Aviary,
if you could
yeah.
please read that. Yes, that's like...
I'd love to. Aviary. The 8-year-old boy can't reach the first branch of the largest of a pair of maples in the front yard, so he settles for the lowest branch of the smaller tree. He easily pulls himself up into the first crotch and pauses there, planning his route to the top of his favorite aviary. He knows each branch like the back of his hand, every step, every handhold. He starts to climb one limb at a time. As the boy ascends, the branches get smaller and more flexible. He can feel himself now swaying gently in the wind. He can almost, but not quite, poke his head out of the leaves at the top of the tree before he's forced to stop climbing. Here, he tucks a leg into the fork between two branches and settles in. First, he senses the breeze gently evaporating the sweat from his climb. Then he feels the sun poking through the few leaves hovering above his wandering eyes. Eventually, the sound of those rustling leaves bleeds into his awareness. All would be silent if it weren't for the rhythm of the leaves and the chirping of an unseen bird. The boy is where he needs to be. A robin lights on the branch beside him. He wishes he could fly. Dancing with a cricket. Moonrise.
So beautiful. Thank you. So from this, I would like to just segue into the reason why you wrote this book. Is it kind of like the boy rising higher and higher into the tree?
Sure, and it's not really the reason I wrote the book, because I didn't really write the book for a reason, because I really didn't write the book to write a book. The book kind of came out of something that I wrote because I had to write. Around 2016, a series of life events kind of hit me all at once. And we're talking deaths, dissolving relationships, just a series of catastrophic losses, all hitting like within the course of a week. And
oh my gosh,
yeah, it threw me over the edge. I went into what is commonly referred to as a psychotic break. And I stayed that way for months and months. I was wandering around the Midwest in my car, completely disoriented. I wound up in the state of Illinois. Got picked up in the middle of the night, sitting in a Walgreens parking lot, emptying trash out of my car, and for some reason I got taken to a hospital and wound up in a psychiatric hospital. Spent the next 2 years in and out of hospitals and nursing homes. In the beginning, a very angry person, wondering why, what am I in this situation? What is going on? There's nothing wrong with me. Totally oblivious to what was wrong with me. And I really was, now looking back, suffering from a very serious illness and suffering some very serious delusions. Anyways, I was a very angry person, and it took me a long time to come to realization that I needed some help. What led me to writing a brief story, during my stay in the nursing home, a woman, social worker, came to me one day and said, "Richard, you look bored." She handed me a 30-page notebook and said, "Here, go do something creative with this." And I took it up to my room, and I thought, well, I'll write her a thank you note. And so I sat down and I started to write her a thank you note, and I realized, I'm writing a poem. So I started writing. I finished writing this poem. That was a Friday night. And I turned the page over and started writing another poem. Well, by the end of the weekend, I'd filled up the entire notebook with poems. And that was the beginning. I still have that notebook. I still have all those poems. There's only like maybe one or two keepers in the whole thing. But I had the bug. And I wound up in the hospital the next weekend, and with a stub pencil on my elbows on the floor and a couple pieces of paper, wrote another 30 poems. And by the time I wound up in the next nursing home, I had a stack of poems like an inch thick. And I was all full of myself. I'm a poet, blah, blah, blah. And anyways, I started writing in earnest. And it was kind of the thing that gave me something to do, but it wasn't really enough. I wanted to see it in print. I talked to a woman. She was all bubbly woman, CNA at the nursing home, and she said, "Well, I'll help you print this up." And we kind of went through a scheme where she was going to print them up at the library for me, but we never got around to it. So one day I'm watching her in the day room, and she's typing on this little purple tablet computer. I thought, "Oh, that's kind of cool." And she says, "Yeah, but I hardly ever use it." And I said, "Well, I don't suppose I could borrow that to type up my poetry?" And she said, "No." And I thought, well. And she said, "You can have it." And this was right around Christmas time. And
wow.
I just yeah, totally.
What a
wow.
Christmas gift.
It was. And I went into my room that weekend and sat down and I typed up the entire stack of poetry in one weekend. And it was that little thing changed my life. I can't tell you how much that changed my life. I had been staring at the same green walls, locked in this building for over a year, and suddenly the walls melted away. My friend down in the office gave me the Wi-Fi password, and suddenly I had the internet and Facebook and Gmail, and I connected with people in the outside world, and the world came to me, and I started writing. I created a website. I started posting my poetry on the web, and I found Virtual Haiku on Facebook, the Facebook group run by Michael Relling. And it started snowballing and snowballing and snowballing. And I discovered Haibun, which led me to experimenting with Haibun. And my first Haibun was a disaster that I posted on Virtual Haiku, and it got torn to shreds by people. But but it was also like a great triumph because people threw all this really great advice at me.
Yeah, you know? Learning. That's learning.
Yes, it was like a workshopping experience, and so we learned by our failures, you know.
Yeah. No, this is so good. I mean, Richard, so many people go through this kind of state of depression at different levels, and this is so inspiring. This depression, or even any such mental state, and the connection to writing. it's amazing. I mean, your story is so inspiring, so motivating. So thank you for sharing this with us.
Certainly, and you know, where the real magic occurred was in the group in Virtual Haiku. Somebody posted a post, and it said, "Here's this haibun that I posted that got published in Contemporary Haibun Online a year ago." And I'm like, "What's a haibun? And what is Contemporary Haibun Online?" So I had to research. I had to research both of those things, and that's when I decided I'm going to try the haibun. And I tried. I wrote a haibun after that, and I submitted it to Contemporary Haibun Online. And by some miracle, it got accepted. And and that the thing about that haibun was not that it was a great haibun or anything, but the mechanism that I used was I took this failed relationship that I had just gotten out of, and I went back into it and I said, I'm going to find something positive about that relationship. And I'm going to write about that. I'm not going to dwell on the negative aspects, the pain and all this. I'm going to dwell on something that makes me happy about that. And so I wrote about that. And I'm going to find the joy in it. And I wrote about that moment. And it you know, it's beautiful. And from that point forward, I just started looking for things in my life that were inspiring, that were the highlights of my life. And that is kind of what led to Poems in the Key of Helen. So I didn't start out to write a book dedicated to my grandmother, but it was her spirit that was driving me writing these poems. Yeah. I thought about her a great deal, and I kept coming back to her. The aviary, the poem about the boy climbing the tree, that's the maple tree in her front yard. And every time, you know, other than her reading us poems, climbing her maple tree was the second great attraction of going to her house. So there comes that poem.
Do you have that first poem that got published in CHO?
Yes,
in Longevity. Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Please.
It's titled South of Tomorrow. And if I can dig it up here.
I think it is page 71.
Yes, I have it. South of Tomorrow. And this poem, it shows my inexperience. When I submitted it without a title, and I submitted it to Bob Lucky, and he wrote me back and he said, well, I'm interested in this, but haibun normally has a title, and you could probably do without the second haiku, which was like a really bad knockoff of Basho's Frog haiku. So I'm glad he got rid of that. I'm glad we got rid of that, and I'm glad it's got a title now. South of Tomorrow. A peaceful country road winds its way through the quiet fields and pastures, just south of the Mason-Dixon line here in Maryland. This lazy pathway is not encumbered with bumper-to-bumper traffic, the honking of horns, or the sounds of marching armies. In fact, the only real commotion here is caused by a few red-winged blackbirds flitting about, squabbling over whatever piece of real estate they're hell-bent on plundering next. The occasional tractor chugs by, and every so often, a car. The Doppler effect seems very noticeable here, or so I've noticed. I was aimlessly driving my own car down this road when I just had to stop, get out, and listen to the view. dragonflies stirring, imprints of wind on a cloud. The scent of hay, corn, fresh-tilled earth, and cow manure mingle together and saturate the warm summer air. It's a country thing. As you might guess, there's a lot that goes into concocting the average bucolic day. But I'm just a tourist passing by. What do I know? A grasshopper jumps out of the tall grass beside the road and lands at my feet. I'm careful not to step on it as I get back into the car and start the engine. The noise shocks the air, and the grasshopper wings away. I pull back onto the road, lost in the sound of the waves I'm making, semi-oblivious to my own existence, and overcome with a sudden urge to turn on the radio and listen to some country music.
So beautiful. Thank you. I especially love the first paragraph and the last paragraph and how you're listening to something. Where the first paragraph where you just had to stop, get out, and listen to the view. That was so delicately put. It's so beautiful. And the second one, of course, turn on the radio and listen to some country music. This is beautiful. And you said Bob mixed the next two at the end?
Yes. Well, you suggested I...
He's a great editor, though.
Very kindly.
So, talking of editors, this is... so you went into Haibun, and I guess the rest is history. You started Drifting Sands. And you do have a lot of editors who come and help you out, and we're all so honored to be a part of the team. So do tell us about that journey, if you.
Wow, that's quite a journey. I have
I'm glad you made it.
Thank you.
Now we get to be a part of it.
The Drifting Sands. Oh, what a big story. It's tied to this whole process and that very first poem that got published, and how I relate to the Haibun community in general, and it goes all the way back to that first Facebook group and that community and the way I was embraced, my writing was embraced, and the mentorship that I got along the way, and how much that healed me. I literally wound up sitting in my room 12 to 14 hours a day writing and just hammering out all these emotions and looking for the good in my life, and the anger just melted away, and it got replaced by this positive attitude and this optimism. And I credit that, one with my own tenacity, but also with this inspiration that I got from outside, from the Haibun world, from the haiku related arts, and the people that I met along the way. And I don't want to sound like I was trying to replace something, but something triggered in my head when the announcement was made that Haibun Today was going to cease operation, and rumors that CHO might stop as well. And I thought, maybe I'm a web developer by trade, amongst other things. Maybe I could start a little journal, and give something back. I had no intention of trying to replace what's already out there or what's come before me, you know. But if I can give something back, then I would like to do that. So the journal is my attempt to pay it forward, so to speak. A thank you to those that helped me along the way.
No, and it's so fabulous. So many well-known hygiene are associated with the journal, isn't it? They would like to give their time for it, and you have a whole bunch of volunteers, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, and that's something I want to mention. You know, I want to really. I'm very thankful. You know, we put out. There's been a great number. All the poets who have participated in this endeavor. This wouldn't be what it is without all the poets, all the volunteers, yourself, everybody who puts their efforts into this and makes it all happen. And there's people behind the scenes, and they don't get enough recognition. And
I'm so happy to be a part of this. This is like a living movement almost. You know, everybody gets into this. So it's wonderful. So I have to thank you. So, Richard, we've never had on the podcast have anybody read out Tanka Prose. Would you like to say a little bit about it, maybe? And there's one request I have for a Tanka Prose to read afterwards. Yeah, if you could introduce and read this Tanka Prose Stronghold. It's on page 41.
And this is definitely written about my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
For me, when I discovered Tanka, something fell into place. I discovered Atlas Poetica, and I started writing Tanka, and for some reason it seems more natural, easier for me. There seems to be more room for expression in a Tanka than there is in a haiku. Haiku are very difficult to write. I used to think I was the cat's meow when I was writing haiku, and the more I try and write haiku, the less I think I know anything about writing haiku. Every time I write one, I think I'm getting worse at it. But and same with Tanka and Haibun. I don't think I'm getting any better. I think I'm just learning how much more I have to learn. But so I do think I find it easier to write Tanka just because it has more room to operate in, and oftentimes I'll start out with writing. What I'm trying to do is write a haiku, and I go like, well, no, I've said everything I wanted, half of what I wanted to say, and that's a haiku, but that's only half of what I want to say, so I'm going to add another 2 lines and make it a Tanka. Lazy, I guess, but and Tanka Prose also, to me, offers a little bit more latitude in the creative aspect. I can get a little more lyrical with the writing. I don't know. There's a lot of distinctions that people can and do make between Tanka and Haibun. I am not a scholar in that area, so I can't really speak to the differences. But I enjoy writing them both. I enjoy writing prose, and so to me, it's they're kind of the same, but I would never minimalize it to the fact of saying, oh, one's got Tanka and one's got haiku, because it's more sophisticated than that. Anyways, Stronghold. For many years, I have wandered this earth. A maple stands where the journey began. Home. Inside my mind, there remains a place, a face, a helping hand. This place is a haven for my roaming feet. It's the size of a thought where the door swings wide. It's a refuge in the face of a rising sea. Scarlet leaves brush the autumn sky. That's where I left her, my anchor, my friend. Her eyes filled with tears as I let go her hand. I'm a robin on the wind, just passing by. But there's always this place to ease my mind. Her arms are around me as I tread the path. Nothing lasts forever, but I'll be home inside as long as her wind and my feathers teases me to fly. A heron in the marsh grass. An old man watches the drift of evening clouds.
So beautiful. I love that the prose is so lyrical in your, in all your writings, actually. Even the prose is very lyrical. So that's just so beautiful. Thank you for taking time out and reading your work for us. So Longevity is available from Red Moon Press, but we will have more details later. However, Richard, before we go, can you read us one last Haibun?
Certainly.
That's on page 57, Traveler.
Traveler. And boy, does this bring up some memories. Traveler. I've taken the highway, that path that leads from here to there, from anywhere to everywhere it seems, over mountains and valleys, across rivers and streams. I've hitched my way through cities and deserts, from ocean to ocean, back home and away again. I've stood by the road in the pouring rain, cars rolling by with somewhere to go. Each time I look in the rearview mirror, mile markers passing by, my thoughts drift back to where I started, when time was on my side. There's always somewhere to go, something on my mind, even if that something is nothing more than venturing into the unknown. I've walked away from pain and into the arms of love, each time the load a little bit larger, the wind a little bit stronger. It seems there is no end in sight. The magic mountains are just out of reach. So I buy a map at a local gas station, open it up, and to my delight, find it crisscrossed with roads. A car radio crackles. The soles of my shoes with a mind of their own.
Richard Grahn's book of Haibun and Tanka prose, Longevity in the Poems in the Key of Helen, is published by Red Moon Press and is available from redmoonpress.com. As Richard mentioned earlier, Drifting Sands is a volunteer-driven effort. This includes our editors and the folks who bring the journal to life. Volunteers have made this endeavor something beyond a journal. It is a community. Now, if you think this is a worthwhile investment of time, pop on over to the About Us part of the zine. We'll drop a link in the introduction. We invite you to leave our team a word of encouragement for their efforts. The music for Ripples in the Sand is from Grahn Art by Richard Grahn. This is Sangita Colorico. From all of us at Drifting Sands, a happy year of the rabbit. Thank you for listening.